Welcome to this episode of Hello World. Today we're going to talk about the role of social media. Digital communication has been around since Morse code, and in the late 80s and 90s, one used a large desktop to communicate through email, bulletin board messaging, and real-time chat. Since then, social media has evolved along with the technical development, and social media platforms are available by a simple click in your mobile phone today. For many, social media is used to communicate with your friends and reach out to likes. For businesses, it is a platform to market their products and services. In recent years, social media platforms has been under the microscope for being a megaphone for fake news and also being used to affect the outcome of elections. Today, we're talking about the role of social media platforms in society, and we are meeting and discussing this with Christian Galindo.
Yeah, so Christian has over 2 decades of experience in analytics across the technology industry. So from biotech to e-commerce to social media. He joined Facebook over 6 years ago to found the consumer marketing analytics practice and now leads the decision science for the Facebook app. So welcome to the show, Christian.
Thank you, I'm glad to be here.
So before we get started and speaking about the social media and its role in society, I need to ask, what do you do when you work with decision science?
Decision science is a fancier name for marketing analytics. When I joined and started the group 6 years ago, it was actually under the moniker of marketing analytics. That was pretty much when most of the analytic groups and other companies moved to data science, to the name data science, and we decided to, kind of use a name that was similar but a little bit more distinct. Decision science actually does typically have a connotation of marketing aspects, and the idea is that we use data to help make decisions for the business. So decision science is the name we went with since for like the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah. So we have now lived with social media platforms for more than a decade, and we can all agree that they have a strong influence on our society. So how would you say that society has benefited from social media, and maybe what has been the not so nice or the disadvantages of social media?
Sure. One of the promises of social media to begin make the world more open, more interconnected, and I think that's being fulfilled quite a bit, actually. If you think about it, we're able to stay in touch with orders of magnitude more people than you ever have in the past. There's the ability to discover communities of people you wouldn't have known otherwise, to gather information from around the world. The internet in general allows for more information discovery faster than you could ever have imagined. Google, for instance, can we imagine a world where the information is not readily at our fingertips? And that's what it was like 25 years ago. Social media is very similar in vein, with the distinction that social media platforms allow for a back and forth conversation. From my point of view, at least, I think that helps make the online world be a little bit less isolating than it would otherwise be. So I think those are the main benefits, just the openness, the interconnectedness, the access to information, the discovery of cultures and points of view from across the world. There's a lot of transparency involved with allowed with social media platforms that weren't in fruition before. On the other hand, though, like you asked about some of the drawbacks, I think one of the main drawbacks, and this is pretty much consistent with any new media technology, is that it can be addicting. When I was a kid, TV was the predominant form of media, at least in terms of consumption. And I think on average, people watched TV back then 6 to 8 hours a day, which is extreme, right? When you think about like being on TV, watching TV 8 hours a day, like who would do that? And the reality is no one does that anymore. Very few people do. That doesn't mean that they're not involved in media 8 hours a day. In fact, I think now television consumption is 4 hours a day, about half of what it used to be. But the rest, the other 4 hours, is mostly consumed on your mobile phone, and much of that is social platforms. So while maybe media consumption is about the same as it was 30 years ago, a lot of it is being consumed on social media platforms, and that's not necessarily a good thing to spend that much time. But again, I think there's a huge difference between television and social media platforms, that at the very least, social media allows for participation, and it's not just passive consumption as it was with television or radio before that. I think, back in the 1600s, even reading was considered a poor use of time. With the invention of the printing press, people were spending too much time indoors by candlelight reading, and that was considered maybe not the best use of time. So it's going to continue. Social media platforms is not the culmination of all technology. There's going to be something over time after that where people are going to feel that there's too much time being spent there. But I do recognize that it can be a problem.
Yep.
There's a lot of sharing of information on social media, and you're not necessarily as a consumer of information on social platforms. It's not coming from the New York Times or any reputable sources. It's coming from other consumers, and so there is a lot of misinformation, and that can be considered. That is potentially negative. But the sharing of information or access to information inherently isn't good or bad. So there's definitely drawbacks on misinformation, but that just goes along with the ability to spread information in general. Yeah. You could do that in real life conversations, spread misinformation. You could do it over the phone. You can do it via text, and you can actually have access. You actually have access to a lot of misinformation in mass media. I think the thing with social media platforms, though, is it makes them much faster and it exacerbates the problems.
Yeah, and I guess it's also a matter of being able to know where the source is from. Is this actually a person? Are you actually sponsored by the product or the experience you're speaking about, or do you have you actually have had the experience yourself, and so on and so on. So I guess it makes it a bit more difficult. I'm thinking about our young generations as well, which they're growing up with social media, so for them it's completely natural to be there. But and I know that looking at the source or analyzing the sources behind it is now a big topic at school, for example, where they really train in being critical thinking and so on. But still, it's difficult sometimes to really know the source behind it, of course.
And that brings us to fake news, for example, or rather misinformation, disinformation, whatever you would like to call it, and which has been a major topic for the past years, and especially during the Trump era, where he denounced fake news all the time. And how does this affect and impact the social media platforms, and how you social
the credibility
media platforms,
of it, basically.
Credibility, and also how media platforms act.
This is a great topic, and it's definitely something of concern for all social media platforms, for Facebook in particular. I want to say, though, that misinformation is not cut and dry. There's actually shades of gray involved, and so there's a balancing act. In the U.S., at least, the big topic over the last 4 or 5 years between the left and the right politically has been misinformation versus free speech. Mm-hmm. In other words, some people might be dismayed with social media platforms because of the spread of misinformation, and others are thinking, hey, there's a lot of censorship of speech, and our First Amendment rights in the U.S. are guaranteed free speech. So there's this balancing act. And also, it's not just the U.S. It's, Facebook and many of the social media platforms are global. And so each country has its own social norms and own laws. And on top of that, the social norms change over time. So it's not as easy as a problem to fix as when you first ask the question, because misinformation, content that's misinformation to one person could be considered something that's really censorship to someone else.
Yep.
So but that's not the only type, I guess, of content to be mindful of. There's other types of harmful content online too. For instance, like glorification of violence or inciting violence. So social media platforms, as they grow and become more mature, they continue to think through guidelines on how to handle that type of content, about what should stay up, what should be taken down, making sure we're as transparent as possible to the consumers and to the government about what we're doing and why. But there's no perfect answer, and just like with a government where laws are continuously being evolved over time, our policies change, and they reflect what we think is the right decision at that time. Certainly, as new cases pop up, we might have to adjust the way our policies and the way we handle content. But there can't be an expectation that we're going to be perfect.
No.
There should be an expectation, though, that we're going to try, and we're going to try is increasingly to stay vigilant, to be transparent, to have really structured governance. It's a big responsibility. In fact, we devote a lot of our resources. I think Facebook devotes about a third of employee time focused on content policies and content regulation. We have large teams that actively find, review, take down content that violates the policies. There's also a lot of AI to proactively find content like this and take it down before anyone sees it. In the case with certain types of misinformation, not just Facebook, but many other social media platforms, in the US, for instance, we had voting hubs. We had access to information about voting, the authoritative information about what's going on and what's true and what's not, that consumers had access to as they were reading on the platform and as they were interacting with the platform. COVID is another example. What's actual true COVID information, or as true as it could be at the time, what was believed to be true. We had access, and a lot of times when people post, you would see, and if it was determined to be a post of a political nature or a post about COVID, links would pop up for consumers to be able to go directly to more authoritative information and not just have the information being posted by friends.
Yeah.
So we're, there's a lot to be done. I will say this though, any technology, especially revolutionary ones, as the technology becomes more prevalent, I think companies have a growing responsibility to protect their consumers. Yeah. What's the same with social media? You can think to other industries, for instance, the car industry. A lot of the protections that come in place, or a lot of the increases in efficiency and the technology that come in place, are a combination of a stick and a carrot. There's market demand, which companies want to do right by the consumers because that's the only way they're going to thrive in a competitive environment, is to make products and services that people want. But there also needs to be some regulation. So, with the auto industry, for instance, there's a reasonable expectation that the cars are safe and efficient. But there's also needs to be a lot of regulation around how the way the cars are made and the safety standards. There's always going to be bad actors and accidents that can't be blamed on the car manufacturers themselves. But that doesn't mean the company should be let off the hook. And it's the same with social media platforms. Reflection of the society we live in. There's the information that's being shared is actually from consumer to consumer. And yes, that's really the source of the misinformation. But to the extent that we can proactively help create an environment that is not harmful and that doesn't spread dangerous misinformation, I think we should. And that's the direction that we tend to go to.
Yeah. So if we look at the more positive aspects of social media and the opportunities they can create, not the least as a marketplace for small, medium, large companies, for example, how would you say that social media tackles the challenge of being a community where people hang out to meet friends and, be in groups, versus being exposed to different ads and so on for targeted information based on my behavior or my interests and so on? Because personally, I'm joining and doing less things because I get more exposed to ads, for example. But then
Right.
again, sometimes the ads are very much related and relevant for me, and then I like to have them there. So it's always sort of a balance there. So how do you view that? I don't know if I should call it a struggle, but the balance between it.
That's a great question. Commerciality in an ad-based revenue model is always going to be an issue. You know, there's a friction between the need to have a great user experience on a free platform. Consumers, remember this, it's free for consumers, versus the need for the platform itself to make money, to grow and to thrive as a company.
Yep.
You know, there's a lot of different ways that we can handle it. The largest social media platforms are free, the ones that are most just general purpose ones. There are some platforms, however, it depends on how you think about what's a social media platform, that aren't free, that they do charge.
Yep.
So for instance, I would consider some niche audience social media platforms such as dating websites. Those are social for sure in nature, but they, you know, a lot of the bells and whistles of the service lies behind a paywall.
Yeah.
There's other primarily consumption oriented platforms or sites, news sites, for instance, that you have to pay for. That actually does have social components because you can read the news and then you can comment and reply to other people's comments. And then there's platforms that are meant for businesses, like Slack, or Facebook has a workplace product that is similar to Facebook, but it's for the corporate environment.
Yep.
Those are all revenue subscription based.
Yep.
But there's other things you could do too. It's not necessarily reducing the commerciality per se of a platform. It might be changing the revenue model slightly. So for instance, we can integrate commerce. And you can see that right now on Instagram or Facebook, where there's a lot of shopping on either platform. The revenue model isn't mature yet. It could go the way where we would take a little bit of a cut from what's bought and sold on the platforms. But right now it's still ad-based.
Yeah.
There's another way you could do it too, to reduce the amount of ad load, is to actually control the hardware. So, you know, Facebook owns WhatsApp, and if you think WhatsApp, which is predominantly messaging app, if you think of that as a social media platform, in reality, it is the predominant social media platform in many parts of the world, then so is Apple's FaceTime, right?
Yeah.
And the app FaceTime is free, but to access FaceTime, you have to buy the Apple phone, the hardware itself, and that's where Apple makes its money.
Yep.
But Apple is not the predominant platform for mobile phones predominantly around the world. It's not, and that's because it's so expensive.
Yeah.
And so if you want a truly egalitarian platform that's inclusive of all members of society in all countries, the developing and developed world, then you're gonna have to figure out a way to keep the service free.
Yeah.
So that really limits the choice of revenue models. The ad-based approach is certainly the most proven to work. And ads in and of themselves aren't necessarily bad. Like a lot of small and medium businesses can reach consumers they otherwise couldn't have through highly targeted ads on social platforms. Nevertheless, there is a balancing act, and social media platforms are, over the long term, they may not make the right decision every time, but they want to find ways to do what's right by the consumers.
Yep.
Ultimately, a social platform won't thrive if consumers leave, and consumers will leave if they don't get the experience that they want, that they demand. So it's not, if you know, in the short term, any social platform can just put more ads, just keep increasing the number of ads people see, but in the long term, that's not a good approach to keeping consumers there. So there's that balancing act. Yep. And at Facebook, for sure, we monitor consumers' sense of commerciality. In fact, we ask them, we survey our consumers quite a bit to make sure we know, or we can understand what the trade-offs are by increasing ad load or increasing things that people might find to be commercial versus their sense of satisfaction with the site. but it's an ongoing process, and we're just going to have to keep working on keeping that balance over time.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, social media platforms are constantly evolving, and now lately with Facebook Workplace, and you also have competing platforms like Clubhouse. What do you see in the near future of social media platforms? What's in the crystal ball?
Yeah, especially in the era of pandemics, a lot of the technology that's being developed revolves around the idea of being remotely present. And at its core, social media platforms allow people to remain present no matter where they are in ways that weren't possible before the advent of social media. If you look back in time, 20 years ago when social media started, all that you could do was just write simple text posts and status updates. Then there was the ability to like and react to those with comments, then add photos. Then 10 years ago, sharing of video started. Then there was broadcasting live. Now it's prevalent. Now you can broadcast live. You don't need a television studio, really, if you want to be live in front of any number of people. Then after that, there was video calls between two people. And now with, especially this last year, you have rooms where people can join and leave whenever they want to. So it's great for conversations, for meetings, for work, for schools. And I think this is going to continue in the near term and into the future over a longer period of time. The idea of AR, VR is a case in point. It allows for really immersive experiences. VR, virtual reality. Facebook is definitely focused on it, and so are many other companies. It allows for really realistic presence when you can't be together. So you surround yourself, you're very immersed. It's getting to the point where it's more and more realistic, where you feel like you're in the same room. And then AR is augmented reality. That's basically taking some features of social media and information discovery online and applying it to the offline world. And you can think of that in terms of smart glasses, for instance, or smart windshields when you're driving, or other technology that I even can't think of. Some of the things that many companies are working on right now is if you have sensory impairments, if you can't hear, you can't see, some of the technology is allowing people to overcome those issues so they can feel even more present than they could in the offline world. And so I think that those are some of the ways that we're going to continue developing technology in the medium term. Also things like Clubhouse, which is audio only. That actually feels like it's a good fit in the world where everyone seems to multitask. Listening to audio alone and not visual allows you to do other things, and that's going to be in demand. So thinking of things and new technologies in that realm is going to be important too.
Yeah. Cool. So thank you so much for joining us today, Christian, and taking us through the world of social media. It's been very interesting to listen to. So thanks for joining.
Great. Thank you so much.
And have a great day.
You too. Take care.
Yeah, so just imagine how the pandemic would have been without social media and FaceTime and all that. It would have been even worse. Just imagine the grandparents not being able to meet grandchildren, or relatives being in hospital and so on. So I think that's been really one area where we can see the benefits of social media in today's context.
Definitely.
Yeah. So what does social media mean in your life?
Social media for me is a way of connecting with my friends and peers around the world. For example, Christian, who I known from high school.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have had this interview here without that possibility. And also connecting with people.
I've learned everything I needed to know on how to clean my deck at home through some Facebook group about how to best take care of your terrace and deck and so on. So it's interesting when you want to find a lot of knowledge.
Yep. You
can definitely go there. So yeah. So thank you so much for joining Hello World today, and make sure to follow us on LinkedIn so you don't miss any future episodes. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.